Hey folks, this is Ham the Guinness Gamer here, bringing you my Ashes of Creation Artisanship update. And this is loosely based on the official Ashes of Creation live stream from November 2023 and the information that was contained within, but I've also added some extra background information to help explain some of the concepts and terms that they talk about in that live stream. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Ashes Artisanship is going to be split into three main sections. You have gathering, then processing, then crafting. Now, there's 22 total professions split amongst these three different segments. In the gathering segment, there's fishing, herbalism, hunting, lumberjacking, and mining. So only 5 in gathering. Then in processing, we have alchemy, animal husbandry, cooking, farming, lumber milling, metalworking, stonemasonry, tanning, and weaving. And then finally in the crafting segment, we have arcane engineering, armor smithing, carpentry, jewel cutting, leatherworking, scribing, tailoring, and weaponsmithing. So that's 22 total professions, and you can get different skill levels in each of these professions. Now, for everybody, you can attain novice level, so the basic level of all 22. Every player can do a bit of work in all of them, so just be a novice in the 22 professions. Then once you move up through the skill level tree, you can get less and less at each level. So the skill level tree has 5 different levels. You've got novice, then apprentice, then journeyman, then master, then grandmaster. So as I say, you can be novice in all novice in all 22 professions. But once you go to apprentice level, you can only be apprentice in 5 professions. Up to journeyman level, you can only be a journeyman in 4 professions. Master level is 3 professions, and grandmaster level is only 2 professions. So each character can only achieve the highest level in 2 professions. Now that is linked to the character only. If you want to level alts and have 2 more grandmaster professions, you can do that, but it'll take you every bit as much time as it took you to get to your 2 grandmaster professions in your main character. So I do like this limit that they're putting on it. It's similar in a way to World of Warcraft in that the limit will encourage cross-player trade and more socializing with other players, because you actually rely on them for all sorts of things, because they have the different higher levels or master grandmaster say professions that you don't have, but also being able to be a novice in all 22 professions get you a little bit of a taste for each profession before fully deciding what ones you want to go into. Now, the highest level processing, so processing being the middle segment of those 3 segments, highest level processing gets done, so the highest level being master and grandmaster, that can only be done on freeholds. Whereas the highest level in crafting, that's master and grandmaster again, can only be done in nodes. But the journeyman and below are available everywhere. Now, the highest level are master and grandmaster for as I say, crafting and processing get done only in the nodes and freeholds respectively. Obviously the highest levels of gathering will get done out in the wild. All of the levels of gathering will get done out in the wild, because that's the nature of gathering: fishing, herbalism, hunting, lumberjacking, and mining. So all of it's out in the world. When you level up professions, this unlocks skill points that can be put into that profession skill tree. These can increase yield, increase quality, or unlock and improve the survey system that I will talk about shortly. You get certification at certain profession levels, so that's leveling up the skill level to the next level, so from novice up to apprentice, for example. And that certification will unlock a new tool and let you find better resources, increase your tool speed, and there's a big XP reward for learning as well. So moving into more detail of the gathering segment of the artisanship tree. You need specific tools to be able to gather. So a lumber axe for gathering lumber, obviously, or for gathering wood, a mining pick, etc. And these tools have specific tool slots in your inventory. All of the tools have a durability, and the first tool set comes from a quest line for that profession. And the quest line there will be a full quest line for each profession, and I presume that'll progress as you progress up through the skill levels of the profession. All further tools after that need to be crafted by the player. Resources for crafting these come from all different professions. So again, that's already leaning into what I said earlier about encouraging social interactions and trade between players. You'll actually need to trade with players of other professions to be able to make the tools for the professions that you are specifying in, if they're gathering professions that you're choosing. As you level through different profession skill levels, you can unlock better tools as well as better recipes for the gathering professions. And the tools can be repaired in the town as you'd expect. Gathering in the world is standard enough. A lot of the gathering in general is very like New World if you've played it, which is actually a compliment. I'm not a big fan of New World, but one thing that they did seem to do right is the profession side of the game. And so far anyway, it looks very similar. The way the tree chopping happens in Ashes, and the breaking rocks and such, that seems to be quite similar. However, the difference would be that Ashes is going to have a lot of different types of trees and rocks, and a lot of different resources that drop from each of these. So in the stream there, Stephen actually mentioned about making using an ash tree or using a birch tree for making the handles of his weapons. So you'll have different options. Again, I'll go into the impact that those options will have later, but you'll have many different types of wood out there in the world, and different types of rock, and different types. We would expect different types of ore, but there'd also be different types of actual stone that will have different benefits and different applications in the world. Generally, lower tier resources will be fairly static in the world, and they'll form a lot of what you tend to see running about, so the lower tier trees and lower tier rocks and such. But the higher tier resources will spawn randomly within specific areas, so they'll not spawn in the exact place every single time, so you can't just sit there and farm it and wait and farm it and wait. So the higher level gatherers will be able to use the survey system that I mentioned earlier. They'll be able to survey certain areas to track down the higher level resources. This will be able to be done in groups as well as solo, and doing it in groups will unlock additional benefits to the survey, such as increased range and presumably maybe even increased yield or increased speed. Some resources as well will be different at night, and some will only exist at night. So, and that's the same then with corruption, seasons, story arcs and events, and general locations. They will all have an impact on what resources are available and when they're even available. You know, if you're talking about corruption there, if a land gets taken over by corruption because the players don't fight it off, then that land will have more corrupted raw resources than ordinary ones. In fact, they might have no ordinary ones at all. You know, a birch tree might become a corrupted birch tree, and then when you're harvesting that or chopping that down, you're getting corrupted wood and corrupted bark from it, as opposed to just ordinary birch wood, and then that will have different properties, those, you know, the corrupted wood compared to the normal birch wood. You can also spec into solo and group based gathering. There hasn't been too much more information given about that, but that's just something that Stephen mentioned as well. Now, the gathering system ties in very, very closely to the bag system that I'm going to talk about next, and how you store the items that you're gathering. You're going to be able to have resource specific bags, and they will use a Tetris bag system where certain types of items have specific shapes, and the bag slots will also be these shapes. So stone and ore, it shows in the live stream, stone and ore takes up a 2x2 slots, and therefore the ore bag will have 2x2 size slots in it. But herbs are a 2x1 slot, and herb bags are 2x1 slots as well, obviously. Now, technically, you'll be able to put the herbs into the mining bag, but you won't be able to put the ore and the stones into the herb bag, obviously, because the 2v1 will fit into the 2v2, but it doesn't work vice versa. However, you're not going to want to do that because each bag has stats and benefits for that resource type. So in that example there, whatever benefits the mining bag has won't be used because you only have herbs in it as opposed to mining goods. The benefits that you can get from the bags include the likes of a stack size increase, and resource specific buffs such as faster mining or reduced weight for mining items and such. So basically, if you're going out gathering, you want to have decided before you leave, really, before you go out on your adventure, that you know what you want to gather. And if you want to gather everything, then you're going to want to bring one of each bag. Like, there'll obviously be a maximum amount of bags you can have, but whereas if you want to specifically go out and mine stone and ore, you're going to want to bring all your mining bags. And then when you're out, you're not going to be chopping trees and you're not going to be picking herbs, because that's a very inefficient way of gathering those resources back. You're just going to want to be mining and filling your mining bags to their maximum with all the buffs that they have, and then bringing that home. And then if you're also a gatherer for herbs or whatever, then you go out in a separate run and do a full herb run. Or of course you can, it depends on the player, that would be the most efficient way of doing it if you have the time. But of course you could go out with a couple of herb bags, a couple of mining bags, and kind of split your time between the two. It'll be up to the player, but there has to be a very conscious decision made when you're going out gathering what bags you actually bring with you to improve your efficiency. As you unlock higher level bags as well, they will have better shapes and are generally less restrictive, as well as conveying better bonuses. So presumably maybe the slots of the higher level mining bag might be a bit bigger, and therefore you technically could fit other items into it as well. Maybe the likes of wood and stuff. Like wood is 3x1, but again, you're probably not going to want to, because you want to utilize the bonuses as much as possible. When you pick up resources as well, bags are automatically filled the most efficient way. So that's gonna be a bit of a quality of life thing, like where you're not going to spend 20 minutes constantly reorganizing your bag and trying to put things, because that's not really fun for anybody, not an MMO anyway. And yes, as I say, there are multiple of the same bag can also be used. So if you want to go out in a mining run and bring maximum amount of mining bags, work away. So one of the next things we mentioned then in the live stream was recipes. You learn recipes, and these generally get saved to your recipe book. And the recipe book is linked to the character, not to the account. Recipes are made from required items and selectable items. So we're used to normally making recipes out of X amount of items in many different games. So they'll be the required items, but the selectable items then, these will increase the rarity and the stats of the item that you're actually making, or that you're actually crafting with the recipe. And you can, if you use better, rarer selectables, then that will increase the rarity level of the item that you create. There are lots of different selectables available with lots of different results. So as I mentioned earlier, using ash wood as the handle of a weapon instead of birch wood, they'll both create the weapon, but the weapon will have varying stats. In this way, one recipe is able to produce many different outcomes. Low quality crafted items can be improved or made rarer in different ways. They can be enchanted, they can be tempered, and they can be improved then while crafting. I don't think we'll be able to improve them after crafting with a separate crafting process, but you will be able to enchant them and temper them. Recipes themselves can actually gain XP, and presumably then as you make one recipe more and more, you get better at making it, or maybe more efficient, or that hasn't been clarified, but they'll gain XP, so there'll be some kind of reward for reaching higher XP levels for them. You can't actually create your own recipes, but you can unlock lots of different variations of system recipes. As I say there, you can use materials and recipes across tiers. You can use low level resources and high level recipe, and vice versa. So now that we've talked about recipes, we can talk about the processing stage. Processing, as I say, will be the middle tier of the 3-tiered artisanship system. Processing turns the gatherables into a different form that can be used for crafting. So, for example, metalworking will turn your metal from the metalworking is the process, can turn your metal from the mining, which is the gathering profession, into ingots that can then be used in weapon crafting, or weaponsmithing, sorry, which is the crafting stage. All different processes need fuel as well as the resources needed for the recipe. Okay, so a lot of different items will have a fuel value, and these can be used as fuel. The likes of charcoal and coal will have a very high fuel value, and you'll generally want to save these for the higher level recipes. Other items like wood will have lower fuel values, and in my head I feel like you can almost burn anything technically if it's, you know, if they're willing to put a fuel value on things. But like if you're using food or something, this isn't a definite that you can do this, but if they want to put a fuel value of 1 on food or something, whereas the likes of charcoal is 1,000, technically it could get you over a hump if you have a couple of bits of food on you and you need to burn it to create the item if you wanted to, but it's going to be a very, very inefficient way of doing it. And even if they don't have food, even the likes of your wood and stuff, I imagine there'll be processes for you to turn the wood into charcoal, and therefore you'll want to do that because wood won't be as efficient. You can cancel a processing job halfway through it and you can get the resources back, but you will lose the fuel if you do that. And nodes will allow certain specializations for processing, so they can increase the job queues, they can have multiple processes at once and different job sizes even, but that'll be up to the mayor to be implementing them into the node. And the job sizes then that I mentioned there, they're allowing you to create multiple of the same item at once. So some general artisanship points to note are there are separate gear slots for items that give crafting benefits. So I mentioned earlier about the separate slots for the gathering tools, but you can also have crafting gear. And this gear can be worn alongside your adventuring gear, but you can toggle visually between which shows. So there'll be a couple of different items that can give you obviously certain different levels of crafting benefits. The usage of the stations, the artisanship stations in the node, is personal. Any amount of people, basically any amount of people can use them at once. The usage of the freehold stations are station based, so only one person can use them at a time. That's why it's important to limit or to choose wisely your family, because they will, if they're using the family that has access to freehold, because if they're using that processing station, you're not going to be able to use it. Also, only you can then see the usage in the node when you're using it, but everyone with access sees it in the freehold, so visually the rules are reflected too. Gear items in general are not restricted by class. Anyone can wear anything basically, but you'll obviously choose it based on stats and the kind of build you're going for. As I mentioned earlier, alts can be used to cover more professions, but it'll take every bit as much effort as on your main, so it's up to you whether you want to actually put that time in or not into the game, and split your time equally across your alts and your main, or however you want to do it. The rarity of items will actually be shown visually. Stephen crafted a sword in the November live stream, and I'm actually showing it here in the background now. It actually looked pretty great, glowing and all there. There's a manual crafting gameplay layer that Stephen's talked about before, and they're still intending on including it, but it's being actively developed and iterated on, so that wasn't shown in the November live stream. We'll see that at some point in the future. And what that is, they're calling it a gameplay layer, but it's almost like mini games for crafting to keep you engaged in the process. There will be no failure chance in crafting, just a chance for different outcomes. And not all crafting professions will be able to create a consumable. Now, just general points that that Stephen made, not specifically about artisanship, but just in general. The January live stream, we don't have a date for it yet, but it's going to show a large PvP battle based around the caravan system. And we'll also see the caravan turning into a raft going over water, which should be pretty good. Some of the November 23 live stream showed nighttime for the first time, so I'm showing it in the background here as well, which is darker than the last time we seen it, and personally I do think it looks awesome. It looks a wee bit eerie, and you're obviously very aware it's night when you're in it. Another general point is that mules use the cargo and crate system, not the bag system. So we've discussed in depth about the bag system earlier, but mules and the cargo and crate system, we're still waiting a proper in-depth bunch of information about that coming in a live stream, hopefully. There will be a tutorial in the game, but not in Alpha 2. Steven's calling it a first-time user experience, and it's not going to be too in-depth, as they want the player to discover the game through the world, not through UI pop-ups. Stolen glint only becomes stolen when it's looted. It isn't stolen when you loot your own body, only when other players loot you. And mob level will go up above max player level. Those random points there were just general wee nuggets of information that were dropped in the November live stream. Not all to do with Artisanship, but still worth mentioning. As a whole, I am very excited for the Artisanship system. It's part of an MMORPG that's very important to me. I think it's great for balancing out a game. If you play everything like I do, or all parts of the game, I tend to cycle between PvP content and PvE content, and then when you're looking a wee bit of downtime but you're still looking to play the game, it tends to be crafting or professions that I go towards. So it's every bit as important for me personally as some of those big sections of the game that I mentioned there, PvE, PvP. And also the fact that Stephen has confirmed before that the best gear in the game will be craftable, so that's going to be very entertaining, and that it's not going to be from the rarest bosses and the rarest or hardest dungeons. It's going to be self-made, and presumably you're going to have access to a freehold to do the highest level processing element of the best items in the game, and then you're also going to have access to a highest level node, a Metropolis node, presumably to do the highest level crafting. So there's going to be a heck of a lot of work to get the best gear in the game, as there should be, of course. And you're going to need to put the time into your professions, but you're also going to need to put the time into forming relationships and being social, and maybe forming yourself a bit of a trading network, that if you're making the highest level swords in the game, for instance, or daggers or whatever, and you have the highest level weaponsmithing skill, somewhere along the line, even if you also have the highest level, so to get the highest level weaponsmithing skill, so Grandmaster in weaponsmithing, you'll have to be able to do your crafting in presumably a Metropolis node that has the highest level weaponsmithing buildings, first of all, okay, but also then you're going to need in your chain, whether it be you or another player, you're probably going to need somebody who has a Grandmaster in metalworking, which is the profession. So they or you are going to need access to a high level freehold with the highest level metalworking processing station. And then also, if you're taking up those two roles, which is a lot of work, and you have to have a lot of access there, freehold and node max levels, but you need somebody else then to have max level mining to be able to give you the gear, the items for creating those weapons. But presumably it's not just going to be mining, you're probably going to also need lumberjacking and maybe even some woodworker in there, the lumber miller probably processing. So there's going to be a heck of a lot of, as I say, work, but a lot of relationships needing formed there, and you're going to need people that you can rely on. You're going to need a lumber miller and a metal worker, or a miner and a lumberjacker, or maybe both, that you can rely on to consistently give you the resources so that you can make the weaponsmithing, the highest tier weaponsmithing items, so that you can sell them. Obviously, you're going to need to pay the other players handsomely, particularly if they find out that they're giving you the best gear for you to, or the best processing items and the best gathering items for you to make the best gear in the game that you're selling for an absolute fortune. So it's going to be, it's a whole game in itself if you wanted it to be, Or, as I say about the alts, you could technically try and do that all yourself, but that is going to be a lot of work. Can tell by the way Stephen talks about the crafting system. It's going to be a big portion of the game. It's going to be challenging and it's going to be time consuming, but ultimately the rewards will be worth it, because as I say, you can make the best gear in the game and then you can basically demand your price. So it's definitely a part of the game that I'm very, very excited for and looking forward to any updates in the future. But for now, I think I'll leave it here. If you've enjoyed this summary, please give me a subscribe and a like below. If you have any comments to make, work away. But for now, wherever you are, goodbye and good luck.